Episode number 23 of the Marketing Life podcast. Today we have John Huntinghouse on the show. He's an expert in digital marketing with Facebook ads. So he talks about three things in this show. He talks about filtering your lists. He talks about one of his KPIs for delivery. And one of the big takeaways for him was testing. So let's not waste any longer. Dive into the show and learn from John. Okay, guys, today we got John Huntinghouse on the show. So, John, tell us your backstory on how you got into online marketing.
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting backstory. So originally the goal was I was going to go to medical school, and I got accepted to medical school, and that was kind of the plan. But I ended up having a fortuitous lunch meeting actually with one of my buddies, and he kind of just asked me a random question that wasn't meant to be life-changing, but he was just like, what are the things that you study when you don't have to study anything at all? And I realized it had nothing to do with the medical field. And so then I spent, the next about 6 years not really knowing exactly what I wanted to do. But then I ended up and I took an entrepreneurship class up at the University of Utah, which kind of got me started running my own blog, kind of running my own social media fan page. And that's kind of where I got started and kind of grinded my teeth in specifically Facebook and Facebook marketing. And that's kind of where it grew. And now, running over here as the director of digital marketing at Epic. But yeah, it all started from medical school, pivoted, wilderness, and then started my own thing, and that's kind of where it grew.
That's awesome, man. So your bread and butter is Facebook.
Yeah.
So like at the beginning, before we even dove into this podcast, I talked about some of your KPIs. So what are some of your KPIs with your different campaigns that you're running on Facebook?
Yeah. So the different KPIs, when you're looking at each campaign, obviously they're client specific and they're industry dependent. So click-through rates or cost per acquisitions or whatever that might be, it's going to vary and fluctuate across, depending on what client you're looking at. But one of the things that we obviously look for, mainly because we want to drive sales, and for most of our clients, that's their main KPI is just cost per join. And so that's what we kind of focus on. Now, how we judge that is usually based on a baseline, right? So what their previous, either agency or their previous efforts landed them. We try to improve them, and we kind of look at them to see if we can increase them, depending on what you're looking at. Anywhere from if they're doing it in-house or just like a freelancer or someone, typically we can, improve those KPIs roughly around 40 to 50%. Like we can decrease their cost per acquisition. But one of the main things that we actually look at is frequency, actually, and the frequency is actually something that holds.
So you're referring to as delivery as well, right?
Yeah,
frequency, delivery. Okay.
Right. And the reason why we look at that is because it's actually one of the metrics that holds across pretty much any industry, any company, no matter what you're looking at. There's this frequency cliff, which is basically whenever the ads get to a frequency around 4, it literally, your positive ROAS and your positive, ROI on, it doesn't even matter how good the campaign is or how amazing it's running. Usually when it hits 4, it falls off this cliff and it literally doesn't go anywhere. And oftentimes most of the campaigns that we're running into that have issues, it's because their frequency is through the roof. And it's okay, you clearly need to work on this, kind of change up the creatives, change up the targeting. Cause one of the biggest things when it comes to Facebook is Facebook's API and their AI is super powerful. And it's come a long ways from when they first launched it. But what happens is, you might create a lookalike audience or a custom audience, and your initial results are actually really good, and you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome, but you forget how fast it deplenishes that core audience, and then they have to go to the next tier or the tertiary tier, and then these audiences become less and less receptive as you go over time, and so. One of the biggest mistakes that I've found for most Facebook marketers, and even a mistake that we make, is not keeping on top of that, and kind of replenishing our audiences and making sure that we're constantly, tweaking and changing it, so that once we kind of run through that core audience, that we're not just constantly now in the 4th, 5th, 7th degree out. And yeah, that's usually, while their KPIs are industry specific, one thing that's kind of across the board is really kind of keeping a close eye on your audience. And once you've tapped out of that core audience, making sure your frequency is kind of relatively low.
That's awesome. I really like that. I can even say that for me, like there's something about passing like 4 or 5, like you said, it just goes off a cliff. But I actually want to pick your brain now about this. So as far as like remarketing goes, would you say 4 is still that magic number, or do you let your remarketing campaigns go past 4?
No. That's why I love the frequency KPI, is because it's actually fairly standard, even with remarketing campaigns. Now, with remarketing campaigns, you might not necessarily update your targeting so much. You might use a 30-day, anyone who's visited the website in the last 30 days, you might keep that targeting option in there. But simply updating your creatives or the messaging. One of the things I actually like to do a lot at conferences that I speak at is I'll kind of go through 1 or 2 slides, and then after about the 3rd slide, I'll just restart and then just go right back into the exact same 3 slides again. And then I'll start a 3rd time. And what happens is, like, the second time when I restart, everyone's like, what's going on? Like, this is weird. Like, I'm feeling a little deja vu. And like the 3rd time, they're just done. They're just like, this is ridiculous. Now, the reason I do that sometimes when it comes to conferences is to show how quickly ads can get repetitive, right? And I was like, I'm doing this live in front of you, and you can see me, we're interacting. And the minute I get to the 3rd time, like the 3rd time you've seen the same presentation, you're tuned out. You're done. You're like, okay. The 2nd time, you're like, I don't know what's going on. But now imagine that's like the 17th or 21st or 52nd, just to really drive home the fact that, when people start to see your ad, really quickly, it either worked or it didn't. And so you really need to kind of keep up and stay on top of the messaging, stay on top of the creative. With remarketing, retargeting, that's fine. You can keep on retargeting them, but take a different approach, take a different angle, because at some point, either the ad worked and that's cool and you got an acquisition, or it didn't. But either way, now you're targeting an audience that it either worked or it didn't, and then it needs to be updated and refreshed. So.
Yep, I love it.
Yeah.
Amen, hallelujah.
Right?
I think that was awesome. That was fire. I don't even need to say anymore. Like, you took that away. So what was... A lot of people have a hard time talking about this one, but the reality of this is, for me, is online marketing, you have tons of successes and you have tons of failures.
Yep. So
what are some of the failures, or what's one failure that stands out that you had happen, but you learned something from it and, made a change?
Yeah. So we actually had a client that we were running ads, and we were just kind of they had an awesome email list, and they actually just simply wanted to do like a kind of a retargeting, and created a lookalike audience. And when we're looking at that, we're like, okay, cool. That's awesome, kind of standard Facebook marketing. And so we created we started off with a 1% lookalike audience, and we're running through this, and we're generating leads, and we're killing it. And we're like, man, our cost per lead's amazing, and we're destroying this. And so we're super excited.
Doesn't that just feel so good when that's happening?
Yeah. And so you're like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And so we end up having our first client meeting, and we're super stoked. We're super excited. And we kind of sit down, and he's just like, they're crap. All of it. Like, all of the leads are crap. And everything that we're following is not working. And I don't know if we want to kind of continue with this. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm kind of blindsided, and I'm just like, wait, what? Like here I thought we were doing so amazing. And then so we had to kind of, like, it blew up in our face. The client was super unhappy, with all of this ad spend. Yeah, you generated a super low cost per lead, but ultimately I'm looking for sales, and you didn't, none of that worked. Now, part of that obviously is internal, like their sales process. And
yeah, that's one of the biggest frustrations, like, that I've dealt with, is people not following up with the leads and just being like, well,
what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, what am I supposed to do with all these leads?
Yeah, exactly. And there was definitely a component to that. But one of the things, actually, one of the biggest insights that we actually pulled from this was, we're like, okay, there's always that issue, right? There's always an internal, like, sales process. What's the follow-up process? But really, that's, we can make those suggestions, but that's kind of out of our hands. So we're just like looking internally. Okay, how can we improve the quality of leads? And what might be going on here? Because clearly it's resonating. Clearly we're getting leads. They're filling out the forms, they're doing things, and so then we started to look at our lookalike audience. And we're like, what is this based off? Well, it's based off the customer list that they have. So we're making a lookalike audience, which makes sense, right? Like you're going to take your existing customer base and then you're going to create a lookalike audience around that. But what we ended up learning is that most of their current clientele is crap. Like they're actually really bad clients, really bad customers. They actually, it's that whole 80-20 rule and they take up 80% of the time, but like really they're not buying a lot. They're barely interested.
They're penny pinchers.
Yeah, it's true. And then we realized, okay, well, this is a problem. Like one of the issues is like a lot of times you'll hear people say that, Facebook marketing doesn't work. But really, it's not that it doesn't work. It just works too well. And you really have to give it parameters. You have to like tell it exactly what you want it to do. And so what did we ask him to do? We asked Facebook to generate as many leads at the lowest cost per lead. And we're like, find this audience. And that's exactly what it did. But what we realized is that audience sucked and it was bad. Like the initial data that we gave to Facebook was bad. And so one of the things that when you're creating lookalike audience or retargeting audiences, you don't want to retarget all of them. You don't want to remarket to all of them or create a lookalike audience across all of them. What you want to do is take that customer list and then really figure out, okay, what is that top tier within that list, right? Like what is that 20%? What is that 10% of that audience that we really want to hone in on? And then that's kind of what we did. And so we took it, we refined it, created a new lookalike audience based on their top performing, customers. And then we started to see, the cost per lead increase slightly, but then they were actually making sales, right? And ultimately our cost per sale was dramatically decrease. It was almost a tenfold decrease. And so they were just like super excited. And then, it was probably one of the biggest, failures at first. Well, initially we thought it was a success, but then we had that, meeting. It kind of seemed like a failure at first, but then we realized, okay, it was one big insight that came from this. It's like, you can't just assume that you want to mimic all of the customers. You only actually want to mimic a few of the customers and really focusing on refining that list.
Gotcha. So just to recap, refine the list.
Yep.
Really make sure you have good people on that list when you're going out and retargeting or building audiences. I really like that. So what was like one of your first online marketing successes? So you said you started working with the news at KSL and then you got into online marketing. So what was that first little initial, I can do online marketing?
Actually, the first initial thing that actually started was actually our own thing, right? It was my own creating our own Facebook pages. And what happened is it started off as a hobby. It was not a big deal. It was just a simple little side hobby that we were starting. But our first success is when we actually made the front page of BuzzFeed. And so we kind of created this little community. And then when we kind of submitted it to BuzzFeed and it just like took off like wildfire, and then all of a sudden it crashed our website. Like I don't even know how many times. And it was insane. Like we ended up upgrading from the basic shared hosting to, we had to get our own dedicated server just to handle the volume of website traffic that was coming in. So yeah, it was crazy. It was pretty nuts. And so, and now that's actually grown to, for that platform, we have over 250,000 fans on Facebook, and we get about 1 million page views a month on it. And that was kind of the first foray into online marketing, and leveraging, other publishers and other publications and, leveraging the power of social media to grow and build a brand.
That's awesome, man. So you were creating articles then, and then it got picked up by BuzzFeed? Is that what happened?
Yeah, so we were creating our own internal articles, and then what we did is we actually just created a native organic, it was a community post on BuzzFeed, and then we kind of shared it with our fans and some other influencers that were here in Utah, and then what ended up happening was that their BuzzFeed's own internal algorithm, it started to skyrocket, and so then it ended up, because of the amount of press and an amount of traction it was getting, it just naturally it became on what's trending, and then it ended up ultimately on the front page of BuzzFeed. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's really cool. So diving into the next question, so I call this the Grand Slam for success.
Yeah.
So basically those campaign, like that one story that you always fall back on it because you're so proud of it. with your success. So what is that grand slam for you? Some people call it a slam dunk.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of our clients that we were working with, we've had for a little over a year or so. And, initially, whenever you're, one of the problems with most marketers is like they feel, no matter how much knowledge you have of a certain topic or a certain area, like there's just things you don't know, and there's just variables, there's unknown, there's just a ton of things you have to go through and iterate. And that's why, I really hate, like, one of my biggest pet peeves is like going to conferences and, you hear all these marketers like highlighting all of their success stories, and like they just skip over like probably the most important part was the iterative process of how they got to that success. And so like sharing this success, it's no different, right? Like it took almost a year of iterating, and fine tuning and understanding the client, understanding us, understanding their audience. But what we were able to do is, we were actually able to take their online cost per join, which was already a record. So like when we first brought them on, like we were providing success. But we're running at like $30 per join, which was kind of their, target market,
So when you say join, like they're joining a group or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so could
you give maybe a roundabout of what industry they're in?
Yeah, they're in the fitness industry. So, but yeah, they're, it's like this $30 per join. And what we were able to do is like now a year later, running, with all that knowledge and understanding of where we're going, we were able to bring it from $30 to $6 per join. And we're in the ROAS of around 45, 50. And so like, we're getting a 50x, ROAS, and it's just like insane. It's just killing it, and it's awesome. So, yeah.
Crushing it.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's absolutely crushing it. Would you be willing to share some of the small tips and tricks of what you did to make that come about?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest key that I've learned is that most marketers actually don't do is, they create like this hypothesis, they create a test, and everybody constantly talks about experimentation and experimenting and learning, which is cool and which is the right thing to do, but nobody ever builds upon their knowledge. Like they don't keep track of their knowledge. They don't keep track of what works or what didn't work, and they don't keep it for a long period of time. So what ends up happening is they're like, all right, let's see whether or not this works or not. And they test something out and it either worked or it didn't work. And then they're like, okay, well, let's just go on, and then like they guess again. The problem with this is the shotgun approach is that you never build on your knowledge, right? And so then you're 6 months down the line, 8 months down the line, a year down the line, and you're no better off because you're constantly just guessing. And while at the beginning of a campaign, you have to start somewhere. A year into it, 6 months into it, 3 months into it, like that campaign should absolutely be more refined. But what marketers don't really do, like one of my biggest things that I've found that they don't do is they really don't keep track. And if you look at detectives, or if you look at the researchers up at a university who's doing medical research or whatever, they keep track of all of their experiments. And then they have a big board, and like as they're going down, third, fourth, 15th experiment, they're looking back at experiments 1 through 14, and they're looking at the overall pictures and like little details along the ways, and any insights that they can pull, so that the 15th experiment is that much better, that much more refined. And honestly, like there's all little tips and tricks, and but ultimately, like winning at campaigns is an iteration process. Like, we're all looking for that silver bullet, that one thing that will just change all of our campaigns. But the reality is successful marketers are successful over the long term because they keep track of their wins and losses. They understand where they're, and they physically write them down, and they can see it. They can visually see it, and as well as mentally understand it. And most marketers that I know actually do a horrible job at this. They have a win or loss, and they're like, okay, well, if your hypothesis is whether or not to see if it worked or not, you will always see that, right? Like it either worked or it didn't work. But it doesn't help you in the learning process. And the only way you do that is by keeping track of it and then making a specific hypothesis, meaning that when I do this, I expect to see this. And then whether that either happened or it didn't, and then you break it down. Why didn't it happen? Why did it happen? Pros and cons. And then you kind of build out your new question, your new hypothesis, your new test is built out of your original failure or success, as opposed to just shotgunning. And it's like, all right, well, we tried that. It worked or it didn't work. Let's try something new. And then constantly doing that, because 6 months down the road, you're no better off on it because you never built upon your knowledge.
Love it. If I had to recap that,
yeah.
I speak a lot about this. Like I talk a lot about this.
Yeah.
It's just testing.
Yeah.
Like you said, like testing, A/B testing, split testing, testing your landing pages, like just testing everything all the time, learning from your mistakes and making those adjustments.
Yep.
So I love it. I love that you do that. I love that you taught that. So just to wrap this up, we're going to go into the speed round.
Okay.
So when you're not doing online marketing, what are you doing for fun?
I really am a big sports guy, so I'm either watching NFL football or watching the Utah Jazz.
Amen, Utah Jazz. Updates in the industry.
How do I keep on top of that? Or
like just any updates in the Facebook world, Instagram world, online marketing world, any updates on your end?
No, I mean, it's mainly the constantly changing algorithm, right? And just really focus on, more of the storytelling engagement aspect of it, as opposed to just the strictly selling part. So.
Love it. Tell stories, don't just sell.
Yeah.
Favorite marketing book?
So it's not necessarily a marketing book per se, but Creativity Inc. By Ed Catmull is by far it's my favorite book, because it's basically a story of how Pixar came to be. But he kind of talks about the creative process. And I love it. It's absolutely great because every time you create a new campaign, every time you create, a new client, you're always doing something new. And so the process that he kind of goes into how Pixar does it is actually very similar to how we run our marketing campaigns. So
that's awesome. So Creative Inc.
Yeah. Creativity Inc.
Creativity Inc.
Yep.
Okay. Check that book out. And then favorite thing about online marketing?
I absolutely love the ambiguity and the uncertainty. Like a lot of people struggle with that, and there's so many options, there's so many targeting options, so many audiences to hit. But that's what I love. I love problem solving. I love the fact that there's a bazillion challenges and that it's such a dynamic environment. The platforms are changing, the customers themselves are changing, their demands are changing, we're changing. But this constant moving and this constant cat and mouse game, I love it. I love problem solving.
You love chasing the results.
Yep, I do. That's what I do. So
I think we all do. Favorite marketing podcast or podcast in general?
Yeah. So what's funny is probably my favorite podcast ever, actually. And maybe I should go back. So it's currently what I'm into, which is it's the Cold podcast. So it's not a podcast at all, or it's not a marketing podcast at all.
That's totally fine.
But what I love about this is one thing that I've learned is actually pulling insights from other industries or other areas, and that's actually how I found to innovate within marketing. Because when you're constantly listening to marketing podcasts or marketing talking heads, what ends up happening is everybody kind of repeats the same thing over and over again. But when you bring in something from other industries or something that's completely tangential, you actually learned a lot. And so the Cold podcast is actually a murder case, right? It's an unsolved murder case. And how does that even work with marketing? But again, my favorite part is this problem solving, how they go about it. Well, then you take the lessons learned from there and apply it to marketing. It's amazing. And so it's kind of weird. It's kind of unconventional, but yeah, that's kind of what I love.
Hey, if it makes you get the results, then
yeah.
Keep on listening, man. Favorite online marketing tool?
Probably that's a good question. Probably my favorite tool is actually buzzsumo.com. Simply because it gives me an idea of what's engaging, what's resonating for certain brands. But one of the most recent, I just learned this. I just found out about it last week. But I'll have to follow up with it. But it's I think it's mod. No. Anyways, I can't remember. But besides that, it's probably buzzsumo.com. So
okay, perfect. Yeah. What advice would you give to every marketer in the world?
I would say besides the cliche of learning to become comfortable, always being uncomfortable, it's just knowing that, like, it's okay not to know, right? Like, that's the beauty. That's the essence of marketing, is the fact that you're thrown into an area that you don't understand. But those who are successful are not the ones who just know all the answers. They're the ones who persevere, those who actually get past where everyone else quit, right? When everyone else ends up, it's like, well, this is not going to work, or the clients don't, they're just too frustrating, or this product is just awful. The marketers that really innovate are the ones that take those massive challenges and continue to push through those walls, right? Like, that's how innovation occurs. That's how these new ideas and new tactics that can be applied to other places are. Like, when you run into a wall, what do you do? Like, do you end up quitting, or do you end up pushing through it? So, but yeah, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. Stop looking for the silver bullet.
Amen to that one. Last question. If you had a business owner sitting here right now and, he's looking for online marketing services, what's one of your big advices that you give them?
It's really setting that expectation of understanding where marketing in general and digital marketing specifically falls in line with their overall business plan, and understanding what it can do and what it can't do. And that it's a team sport. This isn't just like, hey, marketing, you have to solve all of our problems. And because we can't do that. That's not our role. That's not what we do. But there are things that we can do, that we can kind of collaborate and work with, but really setting those expectations of understanding where marketing fits into your overall business plan. And then just really honing in that, that aspect of it, so that they get, so they don't expect the world right out of the gate, and understand that it is a process that you're both going to learn and grow from.
Amen to that. Big thing with online marketing, like from even my experience, is just setting expectations with clients is a huge thing, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and efforts are being done on both ends of the spectrum. So thanks for sharing that. Yeah. So last thing, where did people find you?
Yeah, so mainly you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Twitter, just John Huntinghouse. You could also, you can add me, as a friend on Facebook or whatever. But really, LinkedIn's kind of my big.
I'll add you on as a Facebook friend
there
after
you go. But really, my big, from a professional standpoint, is from LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn, and so I post quite a bit on there. So.
Okay, awesome. Sounds good. Well, thanks for being on the show.
Well, thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Thanks, John. That's going to wrap up episode number 23. So the big takeaways for me was filtering your list. Go through, find out which leads are good inside those lists before you actually upload them into Facebook. One of the KPIs for delivery, just a reminder for KPI, stands for Key Performance Indicator. Make sure your ads aren't going past 4 with delivery. So in Facebook, you can go in and hit a little box that has a drop down, and you can see the delivery of how many times people have actually seen your ads. So one of John's big things with his KPIs is making sure the delivery doesn't go past 4. The next thing that he really touched on was testing. So he had a story that he talked about. They've been working with the client for a long time, and they've been testing a lot of different things. So the more you test, the more adjustments you can make, and the better your campaigns are going to get. So, just a reminder, guys, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you haven't left a review on iTunes or anywhere, please do that. That's just going to help me and help me get my podcast out there even that much more. Just a reminder, again, I'm still working on this course. I promise it will be done sooner than later, but I will promise to keep cranking on it. Hope you guys love this episode, and don't forget to smile and work hard today, guys. Peace. 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 Peace.